Okay.
Howdy, this is James Annon. Welcome to Awesome, Inspiring, and Interesting People in My Life. This is my good friend, Jay Hoolihan Clayton. We met through my farrier business, which is a big part of my life, and we've had very interesting conversations. So we struck up a friendship. Hoolihan has been a cowboy in Montana, Wyoming, and New Mexico. She's also been a wildland firefighter, educator, and an outfitter. She graduated from the University of Montana with summa cum laude degree in education and history. She's been published in newspapers and magazines and is the current author of a series of books based in the American West historical fiction. So first, tell us about this series of books and what do we have published so far?
We have 2 books in this series, Commendable Discretion and With Great Discretion.
Right. Published by Dog Soldier Press in Taos, New Mexico.
Correct.
And available at booksellers near you through Ingram. What started your interest in writing historical fiction as opposed to fiction or history?
Well, I grew up listening to old cowboys and Native American elders who built a huge and lifelong love of history for me. And then with my experience in teaching, I found that actually teaching history as a story is far better than just throwing names and dates at people. And there is no reason for anyone to become emotionally engaged in history in a cold-blooded way. So if you tell it as a story, people become emotionally involved in it, and there's better retention. There's a reason to care about the people that preceded us on this planet, and their stories are compelling. As Yale Doctorow, the writer, said, the historian will tell you what happened. The novelist will tell you what it felt like. And so I wanted to create a series of books that would create some kind of connection to history for people, so that they would understand more about, first of all, for me as a Native person, Plains Cree, First Nations Plains Cree, I wanted people to have a better understanding of the reality of the Native American experience, and not just as victims, but also of the indigenous people of Turtle Island of North America as heroic and determined, and people who survived against all odds. And you're not gonna build that kind of cultural competency through chronology. You're gonna build it through understanding what the prevailing attitudes were at the time, what the effects of manifest destiny were, and of course individual events that created the history of the American West, including the 2 opposing viewpoints during that time period, that of the white people and the settlers and the military, and that of the Native peoples who were losing everything that they cared about.
Right. Yeah. When you say, when you get these textbooks and you just feel like you're bored to death in 1776, and you have these little, it's like, oh my God, what does this have to do with me? And you are bringing it to life with living characters. Speaking of characters, the protagonist is a very interesting person, Wolfe Collins. How did you come up with this?
Well, his name is Charles Wolfe Collins. He's an Irish immigrant. I would have loved to have a protagonist that was a Native woman, but Native women did not have any kind of mobility in those days, and were basically struggling for survival. So I wanted to create a protagonist that would have empathy with the colonized, with an indigenous population that was fully aware of what it was like to be assimilated and colonized. And then, of course, the Irish were colonized by the British for centuries. And so he's an Irish immigrant. His mother's an Irish Republican. She named him Wolf as his middle name because Theobald Wolfe Tone was considered the father of Irish republicanism. And they were forced to immigrate during the famine over to the United States and struggled to survive here. But of course, his experiences under
What happened there?
I don't know. His experiences under British rule, set him up to understand what was happening with the Native
Oh,
Americans as well.
fascinating. So this character comes into this book in what way?
Well, years ago, I was working for a rancher in Montana outside of Bozeman, and we were having lunch, and he pulled out this big, heavy history of Montana published in 1885.
Wow.
And just leafing through it, I found a footnote with a military dispatch that it was obscure, has been forgotten or disappeared, and it was actually a dispatch just after the Battle of Little Bighorn sent by General Terry to the Adjutant General of the United States, reporting that Major Reno had told him there had been a number of white men fighting alongside the Indians at the Little
Wow.
Bighorn, which I had never read any allusion to that ever, and have had some interesting conversations with people that claim to be experts about the battle since. The notation for the book is in the front of my book, Commendable Discretion, the first book in the series, and so people can look it up themselves. And so that inspired the series of books, that I could tell the story. Obviously, I was not able to cross-reference with any other history at that time period, and regarding this concept that white guys were fighting with the Indians. And so, but I did come up with the theory, and the more research that I did, the more that my theory seemed to be correct. And I'm not going to tell you what that is, but
yeah, I was gonna say, so why would they fight for the
why would they fight? And how? Here's the real question. Why would they be that trusted? Why would the natives trust them so much to fight against other white men?
Right. Wow.
And so, and therein lies the mystery. And President Grant, who learned to trust Collins during the Civil War when he was employed by the Secret Service, the federal forces, Secret Service during the Civil War, he sends him on a mission. He does, because of his experience in the Civil War, and because of his connection with Alan Pinkerton, who ran the Secret Service for the last 2/3 of the Civil War. He is sent on missions, mostly by some of the great men in Washington, and especially President Grant. But then he does some work for the Pinkertons. It's a troubled relationship because Alan Pinkerton is a Union buster, and Collins refuses to do anything that he's not philosophically comfortable with for Alan Pinkerton. But it does again give him employment at a time when the Irish were not desired as employees in the United States. No Irish need applied. So.
Right. Oh, so that brings to another subject of all the characters seem to come to life in a very unusual way, and I'm curious about how did you do that?
Well, most of the peripheral characters around Collins are actual people. Of course, the larger historical figures are, most people will have heard of them at least. And I do work very hard to read their telegrams, read their letters, things they've written, to be able to put their own voice in their dialogue. But also I do a lot of research into the more minor characters. So people that operate hotels, telegraphers, people own livery stables. A lot of them are real people that I've ferreted out from various sources and try to find little pieces of their own words, whether it was an interview as a pioneer in the 1930s or whatever. I try to put their voice in their dialogue as well, and hear them. So yeah, most of the characters that are in my books, not only is the history meticulously researched and accurate, but also the people themselves are legitimate historical figures, whether large or small.
Wow, based on real people of the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And then the second book, there's another mission by the same person, right?
Right. So the Northern Cheyenne escaped from Indian Territory, and the military, the history of that whole episode is really troubled. And the military committed a lot of bad acts and fumbled quite a bit. Actually, at the time, the War Department and the Department of the Interior were fighting over jurisdiction over the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And so the military really was not behaving well, or even that professionally, in so many different ways. And so there's a reason that Collins is sent on a covert mission to look into specifically military actions against the Northern Cheyenne as they struggled to make it back to their homeland in Montana. So, and he's sent by the Secretary of the Department of the Interior, Carl Schwartz, to look into this and see if he can get any kind of leverage on the War Department. So,
Oh, so politics and
Washington politics.
there we go. So these books are on Amazon and Ingram. Explain Ingram a little bit.
Ingram's a very large book distributor, and they're the distributor that many libraries and independent bookstores purchase their books from. So if people would like to read my books and don't feel comfortable ordering from Amazon, they can in fact go to their independent bookstore and ask them to order my books if the bookstore doesn't already have them in stock. And of course they should encourage the bookstore to have my books in stock.
There we go. All right, and you have some some book signings coming up.
I have a book signing set in Montana and Seeley Lake, Montana, and Swan Valley for June 4th at 7:00 in the evening. It's a very small town. It's not easy to get lost there. The Grizzly Claw Trading Company, there they have a website. They would have more information regarding the book signing and reading. And then hopefully my publisher is right now setting up some other book signings for me. And according to my publisher, Dog Soldier Press, the third book in the series is scheduled to be published in the fall of this year. And then the fourth book is scheduled to be published in the spring of 2023. So there are more stories to come.
Awesome. All right. If you want to be educated and entertained at the same time, get these books. Commendable Discretion, With Great Discretion, J. Hoolihan Clayton, Ingram, as well as Amazon.